call this a special episode.
Yes.
I don't know what we're gonna call this.
A special
like a bonus episode.
I like that.
Special episode.
Very special.
Very special. I know. We have Dr. Mekel with us. And I'm gonna let her introduce herself because I don't want to miss anything or mess anything up. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and all your fabulousness. So I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Oh, Brittany, Shawani, y'all are so nice. First of all, thank you for hosting the space. I never take it for granted when somebody invites me to their table. So thank you for preparing a space for me today. I'm Dr. Mekel. Harris is my last name, but on Instagram, I go by Dr. Mekel. And I'm a licensed psychologist and health service provider who specializes in grief and loss. So these days, you'll find me in my clinical practice 3 days a week, and then speaking to organizations in my city and around the country. Hopefully in 2022, it'll be around the world, and writing and doing all things self-care. So that's me these days.
What city are you in?
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay. That's what my niece is. Okay.
Yeah.
Memphis. Oh, no, she's in Nashville. Never mind. But still, Tennessee.
That's okay. Just 2 hours up the road. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, Dr. Mekel, your content, I feel like, I can just relate, this stuff just resonate. Sometimes I feel like you read me and then I just feel like, oh my God. So there have been so many times I would like send Shawana posts and I was like, oh my God, like look at this, like read this, like, oh my God. So that is why we wanted to get you on here just to discuss grief. And I think one of the things that I love about your content is that you do dive into grief and how it impacts relationships. And it's special to me and Shawana because I feel like that's how we transition from professional to personal.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a part of grief that there's not enough conversation about and how it can just alter and change your relationships and sometimes end them. So I did want to ask you if you could, go through the technical terms of how grief impacts relationships and why you feel like that needs to be like talked about and why you make it your business to include that in your content about grief.
Yeah. Well, I'll first start off by sort of describing grief. If you, meaning anybody in the audience, has experienced any sort of loss, you already know just how discombobulating it is, especially if it's sudden. But even if it's anticipated, just the suddenness of it all, the impact to your mind. So challenges concentrating, the impact to your body. Grief can manifest in our bones. You've probably heard the issues are in the tissues. So that can happen. And then just emotionally, it's just like a roller coaster, just the ups and downs as grief sort of comes to the shore and goes back out into the water. So because of that, that's what we consider the primary loss. So if you're talking about the death of a loved one, that would be the primary loss. But what we don't often talk about are all those secondary losses. So I'll give an example here. Let's say you've experienced the death of a loved one, right? And as part of your circle, you had, friendships together and people in the community that you knew together. Well, at the time of death, right, that primary loss, sometimes that can cause a ripple effect and create other secondary losses. So not only is the person deceased, right, but then there are these ripple effects where friendships may sever. People that you knew in the community may not actually be available for you. And so it's this layered grief upon grief, which can become really difficult. So that's sort of primary, secondary. But I think what you're getting at is because of the changes in you as a grieving person, that can affect surviving relationships, right? So dating relationships, marriages, friendships, and so forth, which can be equally as challenging as you sort of go on day to day.
First of all, thank you for breaking it down like that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Shawana.
Absolutely. I was about to say, the one question that I did have, I feel like segues after this, because I wanted to ask you, so how do you identify Or like, what are some signs to help you identify that you are grieving? Because I feel like when I've been grieving in the past, I didn't realize that's what was going on until like way later, especially like linking up with Brittany. She really helped me realize grieving in a different way, because she grieved in a way that I hadn't before. So what is some ways that our listeners and even myself can like, how can you kind of tell like, okay, I'm grieving something, like this is the feelings that I'm feeling?
Yeah. So here's the thing about grief. It is a natural and normal response to loss. And what we often think about in society are sort of the traditional ways that people grieve, like crying, right? And certainly that can be an emotional manifestation of it. But grief can show up in a lot of different ways. It might show up in terms of irritability, just being what I call a little bit more prickly with regard to things happening around you. You might experience being overstimulated by people and things in your environment. You might respond in anger, right? So those are some of the emotional responses. And then challenges concentrating, the relationship dynamic. You might be asking spiritual questions and sort of, feeling overwhelmed about the possibility of moving forward in the face of loss. So the key here is, if you've experienced a loss, again, physical death or any other type of loss, to really think about who you were before the loss. That's what we call your baseline. And sort of think about, okay, compared to my baseline, what am I doing now that may be different? And if you're noticing really significant shifts from the baseline, that's always an indicator that you may be indeed grieving, right? But you also might need some additional supports beyond what you think you may need. So those are really the sort of the key variables there.
I think that's what got me in therapy.
Yeah, that's what landed me in therapy too. Was after my mom died, I was like, I'm socially isolating. I was irritable. It was manifested in, my body, and I just knew that I needed some additional support. So, and there's no shame in that at all.
Yeah,
I agree. Y'all want to jump into some personal experiences?
Here's the fun part. I've already received permission from my significant other and friends and family about this.
Gosh.
Yeah. Because I feel like, that's how I was just kind of sitting with your words. So I was just like, yeah, all that. Just like in y'all's experiences, what was that like? I'll say with family, because there are, different relationships in our lives. When were family relationships altered due to grief? And of course, it don't have to be somebody passing, like Dr. Mekel said. So it's obviously something major that you were grieving, but how were they altered? How did they change?
Yeah, I'll start.
Whoever can go first. Okay.
You go I'll start. Shawana's looking at me on the screen like, you gotta go first. So when my mom passed away in 2012, I have an older brother. And so when our mom died, for really the first couple years after her death, looking back at the time, I wouldn't have said this, but looking back, I think I was really angry with my brother. And part of it was he was grieving very differently than I was. So I actually wrote a whole blog about this, and the title of it was When Grief Doesn't Match. So I was the person who, when I stumbled upon something in my mom's, I would start talking about her, sharing stories about her life. It turned into, a whole line of reminiscing. Tears might flow. I was okay with that. Yeah. My brother, on the other hand, was much more reserved and didn't feel comfortable expressing himself in that way. So our grief response did not match. And unfortunately, I was judging him. Because I wanted him to show up and have it look a certain way to let me know he cared the same way that I did. And so when he didn't, I was secretly resenting the fact that he, wasn't grieving the way that I was. And it took me going to therapy and also sort of thinking about, well, who was he at his baseline? He'd never been one to sort of open up and tell all his emotional affairs and all of these different things. And so why would this be any different? And so that was really a key relationship that was altered. So since then, after those first couple years, what I've done is basically accepted him for who he is. And then when I've needed to express my own grief, it literally is that I run my race, if you will, and I let him run his.
Yeah.
And I realize and keep my eyes open to the ways that he may be manifesting it, even if it's a little bit different than mine, which has really helped our relationship stay intact. But those first 2 years were pretty tough. Yeah.
So same exact kind of scenario, except it was with me and my mom when my dad passed. So my mom has never been like the emotional parent. That was my daddy. He was like the talker. He was a more like, let's process this type thing. So when he passed, and I have like half siblings, but we're not like really close. So I grew up like an only child. So I didn't really have like a brother or sister to go to kind of, you know, have this share of grief. So I also had to learn, Brittany, your mom wasn't really emotional prior to this happening. So, you know, we're not going to sit and have these deep conversations. Like, you know, we'll talk about my dad, but it's very similar. Like, I just had to let her do her own thing, and I had to get comfortable with that. But I definitely felt some sort of way, like within that first year, because I'm just like, shouldn't we be talking more? Like, shouldn't we be doing more? Because both of us are like, you know, we were jolted by this. This was so unexpected. But I really had to kind of realize, like, she's being herself. This is just how she is, and that's how she's dealing with it. But I definitely was like, okay, lady, I don't know what you have going on, but I am just feeling like I am out here by myself. So I definitely had to learn to like let her be her, and she will bring him up randomly. It is very random. Sometimes I just be like, oh my God, where did this come from? I don't know how we having this conversation right now, but you know, I'm gonna roll with it. But yeah, for the life of me, I was just like, okay, so this how we doing this? Like, all right, like I guess we're both just adjusting to our new normal. Then it didn't help at the time. I was living in North Carolina and she was in Virginia. So to me, the distance kind of made it worse, because outside of a phone call or talking to some of my aunts and stuff, I couldn't really like watch her or keep an eye on her.
Right.
So for the most part, I was just like, I mean, I guess she's doing okay because she's not talking to me about it. But it definitely took me some time to kind of get over my own emotions about how she was acting. And I was just like, Brittany, this is her. Like, that's how she's always been. So very similar situation, just the players are just switched.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I had to realize, Brittany, was that I had to find those people who were like me. Right. I needed that. I needed to be around people who could speak my mom's name at the time, who were okay with tears, who were okay with, you know, me share my stories. And it wasn't my brother. And it didn't mean that he didn't care. It didn't mean that he wasn't a good brother, but it took me a while to readjust. And so I'm glad that you, like I, you know, kind of came to our senses and realized, hey, wait a second. They've always been like this. This isn't anything new, right?
Yeah.
It's really important to keep in mind as you consider that relationship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my grief is live. You know, I've experienced death and loss, but not on a scale that I felt like has been like on an intense level as that. But definitely, like, I feel like I've been grieving my mom since I was a teenager. She's never really been a mother figure in my, well, we had a connection when I was younger that I remember, and it just always felt like love. Like, it felt like I knew that was my mom. When I got older, it was like at some point, I think things shifted, and she just, I don't think I felt that feeling from her since I probably was like 12 years old. And I think the older I got, the more she kind of put me in like the homegirl type of role in her life. And I need a mom. So it was like, I just had a really hard, I would always try to like go out of my way to be like a good daughter, to make sure that no matter what, I'd make sure I would be in her corner. Everybody always had stuff to say about her. And it just always felt like I wasn't getting anything. It's almost like I was her mom almost. And so I found myself, the older I got, I know I resented her for a long time. Like I was like, my goal in life is to not be like her. And when you talk like that, you pretty much are gonna start living the life to create that. And so I had to change my mindset. I had to love her for who she was and forgive her. But even current day, like there's no talking. There's like, she's just not, I had to like accept her. Like she's surviving in the way that she knows how. And if it's toxic for me, I have to learn my boundaries. I have to know how much I can communicate and how not. And it's been hard to navigate. And because I'm choosing to be healthy, it's affected like my relationships, like with my brothers and stuff, because they still kind of do the whole toxic relationship with her. Like they argue, they fight, they call the police on each other. Like, I mean, all kind of, it's just chaotic, like really traumatizing situations too, like where it gets physical. So I chose to move away. I just moved away, but I've tried to move away a couple of times before. That's a whole nother story. But, I've tried to like do things that we've never done. And because of that, I get looked at as, oh, you think you're better than everybody. It's just no support. It's no support. I for a long time, I feel like I'm about to get emotional, but for a long time, I felt like even what I was doing, like work-wise, career-wise, I was always trying to show myself, like prove to my mom that I was worthy of like her being a mom to me. And I just had to completely like reconstruct the way that I thought. I had to reconstruct what I thought about family. I had to reconstruct how I thought about myself. And I feel like I'm just current day, like learning how to just walk in who I am, regardless to how often I talk to her or, the fact that I probably won't ever get that nurturing from her. Like that's something I have to accept because, she's comfortable where she is. And it's just unhealthy for me to be attached to her. So I feel like which is why I love this episode, because I feel like I'm gonna get so much clarity. I feel like I'm still navigating my grief. Like, I've made healthier decisions. I'm living a healthier life, but these emotions that come, sometimes I don't know how to process it. I don't know, like I love family, but I don't know how to interact with my brothers and sisters really, because it's like I have to shrink or almost not be myself to even, be around them. So it's like a very touchy situation for me because I feel like I'm currently just grieving somebody that's still alive.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you, Shawana, number one, for just being so vulnerable, just to open up in this way. But you really have shed a light on the reality that we can grieve people who are still alive, right? And I think part of it is we're grieving the hope and the expectation and the desires of our heart, and realizing that there is a mismatch, right? For whatever reason, and there are a million reasons, right? But the one thing that all three of us touched on was accepting the people for who they are, right? So Brittany, for your mom saying, you know what, she was like that before. She's not outwardly expressive. My brother accepting him. And Shawana, you saying that, your mom is where she is right now. And you've got to embrace and accept that so that you can reconstruct the narrative. Because if not, we're all three of us are just driving ourselves crazy. And I know I did. I know I spent a couple of years circling around frustrated. But when you can't sit with someone and sit with yourself and realize, okay, this may be beyond this person's capacity, no shame, no guilt, no judgment. But once I can embrace the hard reality of that, then it frees me up to then seek out the support from people and places that can cultivate and nourish what I need in the moment. And so that's what I hear you saying.
It's just, I think the problem is I want it to end. Like I want me to get to like a point and then it's done. But just like healing is never like really finished. It's a constant. And I need y'all to shed light on the fact that grieving is like, it's almost parallel to healing. Like it's never like a get it, got it, it's done with. It's kind of, you just kind of gotta not roll with, but process and take on as it comes.
Well, so it's so funny. This afternoon for lunch, I was sitting with a friend of mine and we were talking about the word healing. And it always brings up this sort of icky, like gooey feeling every time I hear this in the grief space. And this is no judgment for anybody who uses this, but healing is a word that's taken out of the medical framework, right? You break your arm, you go to the doctor and he puts the cast on it and it literally heals. Grieving is not like that. Now, I'm not saying that you can't continue to take steps forward as you process through, but is there ever really an end point with grief? Usually
I
not.
don't
Like,
feel like it is.
there's no expiration date on love, right? And so I think that part of what we have to do is change the narrative. Because if we're talking about healing, which is implying an endpoint, yet we're still managing the ebbs and flows, we're just hitting our head against a brick wall, as opposed to saying, as you sort of alluded to, Shawana, I'm journeying through this. It's a process of ups and downs, and I'm accepting myself as we sort of go through this process day by day. It's a much more meaningful and useful language, I think.
That was so powerful. There's no expiration on love. You gotta make that a post, Dr. Mekel.
Just tag me on it. You can use it all you want.
For real. So to kind of share a family story to segue to intimate relationship story.
I knew somebody was gonna go here now.
So kind of similar to what Shawana just said, my half sister, who has been substance abused like my whole entire life, we've never really had a relationship. But even though she was not really present, we were just kind of my dad tried to, make a thing happen and it just wouldn't happen. There are still times that like I think about her. There are pictures of us that I see like from when I was younger, but we still to this day do not really have much of a relationship. So to piggyback off of what you just said and what I was thinking about, I had a chemical pregnancy, which is an early miscarriage for anybody who's listening that doesn't know, in 2019. And so it didn't really hit me until I got into therapy. And my therapist was kind of like, in addition to you grieving a loss, you have to realize you're like grieving what you wanted to happen. You're grieving your story of, I get older, I get married, I have a baby, and that's just what we're told when we're younger. So I said that to say, I think sometimes even the idea of what we're told, like how stuff is supposed to look, how it's supposed to happen, and when it does not happen that way, no matter what we do, that can put us in a state of grieving.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so that definitely happened when I had my chemical pregnancy. And getting back to when your grief don't match, that was me and my husband. So he kind of saw it as, since we have fertility issues, in his mind, this is sad, but this is a positive because something has happened. I was just looking at it like, I wish nothing just wouldn't have happened versus me having this little teeny piece of hope and then it being taken away from me. So our disconnect like turned into something totally way, 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 way bigger because I was like, okay, I know that I am like on Earth right now. I don't know what planet you're sitting on. I'm not trying to go over there. I need you to come back over here. You need to get on this side of things. And I have to point this out too, because I think we feel this way, but we won't vocalize it. I envied the fact that I felt like he was like ready. He was okay to bounce back. And I think people don't realize like when you're grieving, people go on, about their life. And then we are like, oh my God, this is my new normal. Right. So for me, I was just kind of like, yo, he like back to normal. Like life is okay for him. Why am I not there? Like that really like disturbed me. I was just like, why am I still stuck here? Like, what is going on? Yeah. And getting back to the importance of therapy. Also, where my therapist said, that's a reproductive trauma. Because here I am, working in the mental health field. I see trauma. I know what trauma is. Like, what do you mean? So when she said that, it kind of like sat me down. I was like, oh my God, you are absolutely correct. Yeah. But it just caused such a strain between me and my husband because I wanted his feelings to look like my feelings. And I didn't understand why they weren't. So my therapist had to end up telling me, she was like, Brittany, I'm gonna need you to focus on you right now. She was like, I know you're worried about him and you feel like he's not being honest and he's not really saying how he feels. But she was like, we are gonna have to focus on you. And at the time, I didn't get it because I'm like, look, sis, I feel like something wrong with my marriage. We need to focus on each other. But when that switched for me, it was so powerful once I got to deal with my own emotions and sit in my own feelings, because I also feel like sometimes we start worrying about other people, especially like if somebody physically passes, like, oh, I got to make sure such and such is okay, as if the loss didn't happen to us. And I was not only doing that with my husband, I was doing that with other people around me. Like, I was just trying to move like nothing had happened, like I wasn't affected. So it was kind of like I was having an outer body experience, and I was just like, okay, let me just go and, do life and not really focus on what I am dealing with. So
which is perfectly normal, right?
Right.
I think that again, sort of back to this discombobulation we feel with grief, we are wired to sort of want things in order and want them to make sense and have a sense of harmony and balance, mind, body, and spirit. And a loss of any sort just doesn't make sense, right? Especially like the example you gave, this is sort of a physical loss, right? And it's a part of your body that you've got to connect with every day. And so it's not a matter of escaping this part of you that would have housed, a child. It's a very intimate part of you. And so it makes sense that you were sort of grasping for things to control. We all do this in different ways. And one of the ways that we do this is sort of navigating people around us. If we can sort of make sure so-and-so's tended to, and that's tended to, it gives us a sense of control. But the consequence is we forget about ourselves. Yeah. I wanted to comment too on this whole notion that we have of society of A, B, C, D, all the way to Z.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I had a chance to do this sermonette at my church. Don't ask me how this happened. I have no idea what I was selected to do this, but I was talking about changing seasons. And one of the questions I said I was going to ask God at the right time was, why, Lord, have you set me up to believe that winter always comes after fall and spring always comes after winter and summer comes after spring? You set me up, right? It's like this linear thing when really life is not like that. There's nothing linear about it. And so I think that grief definitely shatters that whole worldview about things happening in sequential order. And that's what makes it that much more devastating when it happens. So I'll share here a little bit about my relationship experience in the face of loss. So my partner and I have been together for 3 years. And in March 2020, my dad died. So this was right before the pandemic. He died of a sudden heart failure. So I had been dating David for a year and a half up to that point. And when he died, one of the challenges that we had was about time. So flashback to 2012, when my mom died, it was sort of this middle of the night call to say, rush home. And by the time I got there, she was literally, dying, actively dying.
Okay.
When my dad died, it was this middle of the night phone call of, okay, he's in ICU. And so the middle of the night and Mekel, we don't really go together too well. And so one of the impacts that this had on my relationship was, I need to know where you are. I need to know what time you're coming. If you're running late, I need to know what happened. I need you to blow up my phone and just communicate all day, every day, because it was fear. There was so much fear about, if I don't know where the person is, if I can't place that person, then what if they're dead? Right? And part of it was, I've experienced that. I've had these sudden moments where the person's here on a Monday and Thursday they're gone. And so that was really challenging, because on the surface to him, it looked like control. Which it was, but it wasn't rooted from the place that he thought. This wasn't a jealous woman, wanting to know your whereabouts. This was, I am panicked and need some certainty because I've faced a lot of unpredictability with people. And so that just came down to us communicating really well. And I'm not gonna say that it doesn't come up still, but he's gotten better at sort of, hey, I'm gonna be there at 6. Oh, 5:50, I'm running late. So that way it's like, Okay. Not sitting there at 6:01 panicking, thinking, oh my God, I'm gonna get a phone call. So both of our responses are really common responses in the face of loss. So yeah, that's been my experience.
Oof. Lord have mercy.
Yeah, it's a lot. What about you,
Yeah.
I say it's my turn.
Well, there's 3 of us in here, so.
But I was gonna say, I feel like we same situation. Well, but kind of like Brittany's. I had a miscarriage in 2017. I think no, it was 16 going into 17. I was pregnant. I had the miscarriage January 2017. And it was also during a time where me and my ex-husband used to like break up and get back together all the time. So this was like a time when we were reconvening. And I know when we were trying to get pregnant before the split, nothing was happening. So this time around, I know for me, I was really trying to figure out, is this something I'm supposed to be doing? Like, am I supposed to like be getting back with him, whatever, is this healthy, whatever? And when I got pregnant, I felt like I felt like that was like a sign. Oh yeah, this is what you're supposed to do. And so I wrote my lease in my apartment, moved back in. With the house that he had bought, we left out of there because it was like so many bad memories. It was like, we're gonna start over, we're gonna move somewhere new. And I'm pregnant and everything. So in the midst of all this, he loses his job. And then I think he lost his job, and then I started having like complications. And then but my thing was, I was like, okay, if I make it to past the first trimester, I'm gonna be fine. Like, that's what I kept telling myself. And literally the last day of the first trimester is when I miscarried, the last day.
Oh my gosh.
So I was tore up. And then it was just so bad. So, but his way, because he lost his job, he already had ill feelings about it anyway. So when I actually miscarried, it was almost like a sigh of relief for him.
Yeah.
And for me, I was just like, because I have been wanting, I wanted a daughter. I still want a daughter so bad. And I just knew like this, this was meant to be. So like, not only was I crushed because I lost a child, I was crushed because it's like he didn't care. He told me one morning, I don't understand why you still crying about it. Like, and I couldn't, and I think that moment turned, that changed the dynamic forever. I don't think I ever was able to be vulnerable with him ever again. Like, I haven't been, I wasn't. And so it ultimately led to us divorcing. I could not, it's like I had no compassion at all after that. Once I did heal, I literally started like my entrepreneur stuff after that. Like, I remember driving when I finally started feeling like myself again. And I heard God say, if you don't do it now, like, you're never going to do it. And it was like, you lost, but you're about to birth something else. And literally that's when it started. And so it was like, from there, it's like I walked away and I walked into something different. And it took some years for me to completely like sever that tie, but we've been separated since 2018. We divorced last year in August before my birthday. So, the grief did not match. I don't even know how to label that. I don't know if he experienced grief in that, because his experience is his experience. His desires are his desires. I can't weigh that and measure it. But I know for me, it was just a no. There was no turning back from that. And so I had to just literally walk away.
Which is a really common phenomenon. So one of the things I do in my practice, I'm perinatal mental health certified. And so one of the things that I do is sort of walk with women who've experienced loss, but also with their husbands or their partners. And it's difficult because if you think about the divorce rate just in the general population, I think it's 1 out of every 2 at this point, but it's even greater in the face of a loss. And part of it is exactly what you're describing, Shawana, which is this mismatch between the parents and how overwhelming that can be. And so I think what happens, it's so complicated from the woman's perspective, because this is part of her body. Right. And to experience a loss is very different in some ways than a man or someone else, because it's not physically attached to them. So there's that. Then there's just all of these gender sort of stereotypes that we have about manhood. And again, this is not to defend or not defend. It's just the reality of how men are groomed in this society, which is not to express, not to dwell, but it manifests in different ways. And so again, it comes down to, all right, how is this person navigating it and how is it manifesting for them? But I can certainly understand in a relationship that the weight of this all, and because the differential responses to it can absolutely lead to miscommunications.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. It's complicated. I'm glad that you were able to reconstruct the narrative. I'm stealing that, by the way. I love that reconstruction and rebirth something in something that was powerful for you and meaningful. That really matters.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ooh, Lord, this is a lot.
This is good.
I know. Whose idea was this?
It was mine. And I told Shawana the other day. Yeah. And I told Shawana the other day, I was just like, as much stuff as we have talked about, I was like, I don't think we've ever talked about any of this stuff like directly. I was like, I think we kind of skated around it, but I was like, I don't think we ever like talked about this directly. So I had been trying to brace myself all day, like, okay, this is really about to happen. And last but certainly not least, grief can alter friendships. I'm laughing because I think about my own situation.
Oh goodness. I just literally I had a couple people pop in my mind. Yes, it can.
Shawana, you want to go first and she wants to go last? I do not want to go first on this one. I do not.
Okay, I'll start. So I'm trying to find the verbs, like the verbiage right now. So I experienced like two of my closest friendships never at the same time. And that was really intense. Like it was, I didn't know how to handle it, but same thing, like, you know, we get older, we grow and we go into different like walks of lives. Some people get comfortable where they are, or they choose a different path. But I feel like in my situation, it was viewed in a way like almost like, oh, well, you're doing this now and you don't care about us anymore. It was like a situation like that. And on top of it, I had some very unhealthy ways of communicating and just being in friendships anyway, because of my mother-daughter relationship and my relationship with my father. Like I felt like I was always going through like trying to figure out how to be better, like literally trial and error and experience. And unfortunately, I felt like part of that, I kind of pulled my friends along for it a little bit too. But at the time when we severed, it was during a time when we were really communicative. So it was kind of like, dang, you waited till I'm like, quote unquote, being healthy to like just decide, you know, I don't, you know, I just don't want to anymore. I feel like this. And, you know, everybody has their expectations. And I think what crushed me the most was we were so close. I always thought there was nothing we couldn't like come to the table and talk about and like fix. So in my head, even with me being busy and not communicating, like when we saw each other. And in my head, if you're not telling me something's wrong, I'm thinking everything's okay. And then it would be like just randomly issues. And I'm like, well, how long have you been feeling this way? And you just find out all this stuff later, and it just everything kind of came to a head. And then I feel like I got to the point where I was still kind of coming outside myself, trying to be like, hey, is everything okay? Or maybe we should just do that. And I had to come to a point where I was like, this person has just decided that for whatever reason, you know, they want to walk away, and I have to be okay with that. Like, I can't keep running behind people and chasing and being the one to be like, let's sit down and talk. You know, sometimes you just got to let things be. So I know for me, grieving both of my friendships, it was like, it was very hard not to look at myself like really negatively, because it just felt like, dang, what's wrong with me? Like,
I hope you've answered that question and come to the conclusion that the answer is nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Yes. Yeah, right. It's nothing wrong.
Yeah. First of all, I got to give you kudos for being woman enough to acknowledge the trials and errors of friendship. If we're all honest, I think that we're all trying to figure it out and make it work, and experience losses, and, you know, just have fear about connection and intimacy and depth and all these different things, which can be challenged from our family and just living. It's hard. And I think sometimes there's collateral damage, and that's just the truth of it.
Yep.
As nasty as that sounds, we've all done
that honest truth.
Yeah. We're all trying to figure it out. But certainly I think that grief and from my perspective, it's sort of shown up in three ways. The deaths that I've experienced, number one, highlighted some friendships that were already crappy to begin with, right? It was sort of like I was sort of being sucked dry, if you will, anyway. And then my mom's death, it was sort of like, wait a second, I don't have the mental, inner, physical, or spiritual capacity to do this. And to be honest with you, those friendships felt like a release. And it was like, okay, this just helped propel me in the right direction. Then there were the friendships where I desperately needed them to be there, and they didn't have the emotional or mental capacity to do it. And that was very difficult, because I think that goes back to what we were saying at the beginning, expectations. And for whatever reason, my circle's always been extremely small. Like, I know a lot of people, but people who really know me is limited. And so that was extra painful, because I was putting expectations on them, going, wait, I don't have 50 people to pick a piece of the pie. Like, I'm leaning on y'all too. I'm leaning on y'all three to be able to do it. And in certain situations, they couldn't. And so that was very difficult to get through. Then there was the third camp, friends who were showing up, were doing the best that they possibly could to be available. And I didn't have the energy. To show back up, because grief wore me out. And so it was sort of like they were calling, and they may not get a phone call for another year. Right. And by the time I was ready to do it and had the energy to do it, they had sort of checked out. And again, to their credit, rightfully so. So it is complicated. And I think that one of the things that is absolutely required with friendships is that as much as you possibly can, if you're the grieving person, to be as open and honest as you can, even if it's, I can't do it right now. Will you still be there when I can? Or, you know what, girl, this has been a mess since the 90s. Let's just let this go. So, and that's a hard conversation too. That takes a lot of womanhood. We can all learn from Shawana. A lot of womanhood to show up in that. But I think as much as you can be open about it, the better, so that at least you can prepare yourself as much as possible to deal with the realities that friendships are hard in the face of grief, and if not. So.
All right, y'all. I'm getting tear jerked a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, so you're welcome at this table.
So all of that for my example. My therapist called this the perfect storm, because she was grieving so something happened in her life the week before I had my chemical pregnancy. So we were grieving two different things at the same time. So I felt like I was trying to show up for her the best that I could. I didn't feel like it was being reciprocated. And then in my mindset of, I just have 1,000 things going on. Like, I don't even know who I am right now. Those emotions intensified. So, normally maybe her being to herself wouldn't have bothered me. But now I'm just kind of like, dang, like, you're not going to say nothing. Like, even after, I kind of came to you and was like, you sure you're good? Nothing happened. So that's
that prickly feeling I was talking about earlier.
Right. So it was almost a situation of, she thought she was doing what was best because she had her own stuff going on. Why, come to you, you got your stuff going on. Why am I going to come over there, with my emotions or put my baggage on you and you're grieving? My approach was, look, sis, we can ride this out together. Like, we can lean on each other. But having an expectation, like you said, that really, really bothered me, because this was like one of my childhood friendships. So I'm just like, what is going on? Like, why? This is just not lining up. So in the midst of me feeling kind of abandoned and like she didn't care and not being able really to read between the lines, like, I abruptly, directly, indirectly communicated my feelings. Okay. And my delivery was horrible. So ultimately,
I love us. It's just like,
listen, I suck. That's what you get here.
Listen. It was like, I ended up apologizing like like a year and a half later. I still have my feelings about the situation, but Brittany, you could have did better than that. But at the time, I did not have the capacity, like I didn't have the energy to have another conversation with you. Like I just felt like, you know how I feel. I feel like I left the ball in your court. When are we going to talk about this, or is this just a lost cause? Then my therapist had me read this book called Infertility and PTSD. And it opened my eyes to the fact that because all of this happened at the same time, me grieving her was so wrapped into my chemical pregnancy that I didn't even understand it until like 6 to 8 months later. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So literally,
it sounds like your therapist sounds amazing. Your therapist sounds amazing.
She's phenomenal. Okay. I love her to pieces. But at the time, I did not have the emotional capacity to like explain that. And then of course, in the midst of it, I'm at home miserable because, my husband in one room, I'm in the other room. We on two different planets. So it was just like, in my mind, like, dang, you ain't checked in on us. Like, you don't know what's going on at this point. So it was I took a lot of things personally that I think had I would have not been grieving and dealing with my own emotions, I don't know that I would have been thinking the way that I was thinking.
Yeah.
And I wish, like with grief, I wish we had like the freedom to actually say how we feel. Cause sometimes we'll say, I'm sad. And we want to say, no, I'm angry. Like I'm pissed. Like today is not a good day. Like we don't show up like that. I'm doing all right. Thanks for checking. And I feel like had I had the bravery to just say, no, this is where I'm at. Like, this is how I'm feeling. It probably would have been better for everybody in a situation, to be honest.
Yeah.
But to this day, we are not friends. We are cordial, but it almost like, it was like the perfect storm. It was like her grief and my grief was just, it was not happening. I will say it probably brought up some breakdowns in communication that were already there. But the timing of it was just crazy. So it really just, it took me by surprise how it unfolded. But I really do wish I had like the language to say, this is where I'm at and this is how I'm feeling. Because at the time, the intensity of my emotions were not matching the situation. But I was thinking out of a grief mindset. So
yeah, which again is so common. And I think that that's why I appreciate our conversation so much, because hopefully whoever's watching this is thinking, okay, yes, I'm experiencing that intensity. And it's better. I would argue it's better to show up raw and real than fake and deal with long-term consequences. I too had a friendship that I had to circle back to about 3 years later. I'm a little bit more stubborn than you, Brittany. Mine took 3 years. I'm sure the person was kind of like, whose number is this? And was sort of like, what's going on? And the friendship's not the same, but I was able to go back and say, hey, for a year and a half, I was in a fog. After that, I was pissed off because I didn't think you showed up the way I wanted you to.
Right.
And just be sort of honest about that. And then learn all the stuff that she had been going through those first 2 years that I had no idea about because I was in a bubble. And so this is where that accountability on our part as grieving people as well matters and other people. Right? So I'll say that I think sometimes the supporter of the grieving person gets a bad rap. Like they're not showing up. They're not doing it. Look, sometimes people are showing up, but we as the grieving people can't show up well. And so that can lead to the erosion of the relationship. So I'm glad that you did what you did and took responsibility for your part. And who knows what the future holds with that friendship or whoever. So it's very, very common to go through this. Like, I think that being honest, and it's hard, but I think the grief community in particular is sort of changing the narrative about what it means to be authentic. Because when you're whether you like it or not, you can't help but show up raw. You can't help it. And I honestly think that's helping society. Like people actually showing up as their real selves. COVID has brought a lot of realness, and that's not a bad thing. So
what advice do you have for people currently experiencing grief?
I would say a couple things. Number one, go easy on yourself, right?
Mm.
So this is something that is easier said than done,
Mhm.
right? But you got to remember,
Yeah.
right? Back to the discombobulation. As you grieve, you may be expecting that you're going to be able to show up the same way you've always been, pristine, put together, in order, or maybe you were falling apart beforehand, but know that with a loss comes changes in how your body responds, how you think about things, how you perceive the world around you, and your emotions. So go easy. If you have a bad day, brush it off and realize that tomorrow is another day, right? Because all of that is just what I consider like stuffed energy.
Yeah.
And a stuffed chicken can only be so stuffed until his insides start coming out. So go easy on yourself.
Right.
The second thing I would say that I'm learning is really critical as you grieve is rest.
Mm.
And I don't mean like a clinical depression. I'm not getting out of bed rest. I mean
Right.
that resting at night, yes, but targeted spaces throughout the day to literally just be, just be. I know we live in a world where everybody tells us we got to be doing stuff all the time, but I'll be honest, before this podcast, I took a nap and the clock went off 5 minutes until record time. And I was like, I needed that. I needed that because throughout the day, it was a lot of stuff bombarding my nerves. And I
Right.
said, I gotta rest. So be okay with resting, with not feeling like you've got to be doing, and also know that grief is an active process, but that doesn't mean you're talking about death, loss all the time. It may be that you're figuring out what you might need to shed. What do you need to prune? You may need to prune some things to create space for yourself so that you can show up well for you.
Well, this has been, y'all don't understand.
Therapeutic. This has been therapeutic for me.
Especially after this long day, like literally same thing. Brittany, I see what you've been going through, like just the back to back. To be able to just sit here and process like this. And this was, the listeners, I just want y'all to know this was for me, okay? I know it's for y'all too, but this was for me.
Listen.
Because I feel so much, I feel light. I feel so light right now.
Good. And you deserve that.
Thank you.
You deserve that. Yeah, I think that, you know, with grief comes so much weight. And to be honest with you, that will be the case. Like there's no skating around that. At the same time, wow, what an amazing experience it is to just like release and be able to breathe, be able to exhale. It's so needed. So needed.
I think it's nice to be seen when you are grieving. I think when you feel like somebody like gets it, like even if it's a little bit, it can be like a game changer just to feel like, oh my God, like somebody knows, like somebody gets it. So yeah.
Okay, so because you said that, I'm going to leave you with, this is not my quote, and I count it to my head, not my heart. If somebody's watching this, yours, just tag me and say I stole it and it's yours. But the quote is, grief is not anything to be fixed. It is something that it should be witnessed.
Yes.
So if you're supporting someone, right? Remember, grief is not something that you can fix, but it is something that you can witness. And as Brittany said, when it's witnessed, what an incredible gift to the grieving heart. So,
okay,
there we go. Drop the mic. We're done.
Literally. Yeah, for real. That's it.
Wow.
My God.
So.
Well, we want to, as always, thank our listeners for tuning in. Plug yourself, Dr. Mekel. What's your Instagram handles? Website? Give it to us.
Yeah, Instagram handle is at Dr. Mekel, DrMekel. It's Mekel, by the way. So just get that in there. Twitter's the same. Facebook is the same, Dr. Mekel. And then if you want to head over to my website, you can actually go to Instagram. That's where I am the most. Click that link in the bio, and it's going to take you to all kind of free stuff, courses I'm offering, my book, and so much more. There you go. Link in bio.
Yes.
Follow her. Her content is amazing. For real. Yeah.
Thank y'all so much for creating space.
All right. So follow us on everything, Brown Skin Blueprints. And we will kick it with y'all next time.
Bye.